So excellent. We're right at the top of the hour, so we're going to get started today. Good afternoon to some, good morning to some. On behalf of the FSHD Society, I want to welcome you all to today's FSHD University webinar. And again, before I get started, just a quick reminder, we're going to record this session. It's going to be made available on our YouTube channel. We take time to edit it, so it should be up and running in about a week or so. Excuse me. And I also encourage you to use the chat function as we have been doing to tell each other where we're hanging out from or where we're calling in from. But if you do have questions for Cindy, please use the Q&A function. For me, it's a little button on the bottom of my Zoom screen. And that's what I'll be monitoring later after Cindy's presentation to ask her any questions that you might have for her. Living with FSHD can make everyday tasks, as Cindy and I were just talking about, from getting dressed to preparing meals to navigating your home, all of it more challenging. Occupational therapy focuses on helping people build or maintain their independence by adapting different techniques, tools, environments, just to better support all of their needs. So today we are super honored and grateful to have a licensed occupational therapist, Cindy Lourie, who will talk with us about practical strategies for really thriving with FSHD and share how OTs can support both patients and their caregivers. She'll show us some examples of some home modifications, mobility and daily living solutions, lifestyle hacks that make daily routines easier, safer, and more accessible. I want to brag a little bit about Cindy. She earned her BS in occupational therapy at the University of Florida and her MS in healthcare administration from Mercer University, and has over 30 years of experience helping adults thrive despite their changing physical or cognitive needs. She's the owner and president of a company called Enable Home Solutions, where she leads efforts to adapt homes and tasks to meet people's goals and lifestyle. So with both her clinical expertise and practical approach, Cindy really empowers patients and caregivers to take control of their environments and maximize daily living with dignity, confidence, and purpose. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the reins over to Cindy, and let's go for it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the introduction. I'm going to share my presentation here. And please, if you have questions, in the Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer whatever I can, or can at least get you pointed in the right direction, and can always get your information and get you the information that you need if I do not know it. At the end. So already introduced, yes, I've been an OT for a really long time, over 30 years now. And just now that I own this business and really can focus on the things that I really love working with people on, I truly think that OTs can help people live the way they want to be able to live. Occupational therapy, just as kind of a review, OTs are part of that rehab team, OT, PT, speech, recreational therapy sometimes, and occupational therapy as in what we do with our day, what one engages in. So it's not always a profession as we in the United States usually call it, right? Our occupation, but it's anything we engage in, from ADLs, which is our activities of daily living, IADLs, which are instrumental ADLs, like those more difficult or harder tasks like money management and med management, but also leisure tasks, things that you want to be able to do with your day. Occupational therapists generally work with clients to improve the skills needed to actually do those tasks, but also are really experts, if we want to say, on trying to figure out ways to modify as needed. And that's what we're really going to talk about today more, is those modifications, ways that we can modify the activity or the environment, so the things that you want to be able to do, you can still do as much as possible, function independently as much as possible, and in a safe way. That being said, we know that not all home or activity modifications are helpful. So, modifications, whether it's activity or home, environmental modifications have to be individualized and have to make sense for each person. So, everyone is different. We know everyone is different. We could all have the same diagnosis, but we know that that diagnosis presents differently in everyone. And that's pretty much across the board with any diagnosis that we may have. So, I am biased, but I do believe that a true assessment by a therapist, OT, and in my case, since that's what I am, to do a full assessment and see how a person moves in and uses their space and then makes recommendations based on that individual person. So it can make sense for them because we know what works for one person does not work for someone else. So, to review, an occupational therapist evaluates a person's mobility and ADL status in their home, sees how, again, they move in and use their space, and then looks at the big picture, setting goals, figuring out what the client's goals are, and then figuring out big picture what that means, as far as modifications that can be made, ones that make sense based on each person's individual situation. And that includes finances, but also caregiving and the restrictions in the home environment itself, what can and can't be done. And of course, those recommendations have to be personalized and individualized to make sense. So a lot of even what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to give examples of things, but I don't know everyone here, and everyone would have different needs. So I'm giving a lot of information on what is out there, so you have an understanding of what is out there, the things that may help. But again, I do recommend that, ideally, and we started talking about this ahead of time, but it's finding that good OT. Sometimes PTs are in this space, but finding that good OT who can really help assess the situation and make those individualized recommendations. Doing these types of assessments and figuring out what works for you helps plan for the future as well. It can save money in the long run, but especially with a diagnosis that can be progressive, making decisions ahead of time before the crisis occurs can save money significantly, but also stress and anxiety for any future changes. But then also the small things. We can make a plan and say, okay, right now this may work, but if these things start happening, then we can change and use this device instead. So, hopping right in on various things that are out there. Again, this is not meant to be all inclusive. There are lots of items out there on the market, some good, some not so good, that can really help, but each individual situation may be different. I was at a client's home yesterday who said, "Oh, I have this device that a friend was going to give my dad who's having trouble standing up from his couch. And can I just take this from my neighbor, basically?" And I looked at it and I said, "Well, actually, no, that's not going to work for your couch because it had a piece of metal that had to go underneath the couch for it to work. And their couch had a recliner on the end where he usually sat, so it had a big base at the bottom. So a piece of metal wasn't going to fit under her couch. So just that simple thing alone, that if she had seen that on Amazon and had went ahead and purchased it, now that's just a waste of money because it wouldn't have worked, and she's got to return it, even though it worked great for her neighbor's dad. So again, every situation is different. But generally speaking, It is usually easier to sit and stand or move from surfaces that are not too low, too soft, too deep, and that yay or nay have two armrests or not. But for the most part, if things are too low, too deep, too soft, they're harder to get up and down from. So a lot of the modifications when we look at furniture then is how to counterbalance what furniture is already there. So is it raising a surface? Is it adding pillows behind your back so it's not so deep? Is it using a lift recliner for those times where you just really can't use those quad strength on your own to be able to get up, that you can press the button when you need to and it helps you lift? Is it just having, like, for instance, the correct bed that lifts and lowers, right, the high-low component that allows someone to be able to get up and down from it easier? There's a lot of nuances about beds out there, some that you can get on the market. Anything that you can pretty much just get easily on the market, like a Tempur-Pedic or something like that, the adjustable beds, that is just head and foot adjustability, not high-low. So the high-low component, even though online, and I always hate when they word it this way, they'll say that it's height adjustable. It is height adjustable in the sense that you pick the height of the leg that you want, and there are different options. But then once you have that height of the leg of the bed, it stays that way. You would end up having to, someone would have to flip the bed over or lift the bed up and change that height if needed. So it is not adjustable as needed. It is you pick the height that you want and then it stays that way. And it's only head and foot adjustability by the push of a button versus a hospital type bed, and lots of different variations there. But hospital type beds, which, yes, increase cost significantly relative to what you can get on the market, those are the only kind that have the by push of the button high low adjustability. So that is a lot of people get, I want to say fooled by that, but they'll get an adjustable bed and then realize they actually need the high low for caregiving or to get into the wheelchair or whatever, and that their bed does not provide that. But lots of ways of fixing a bed, even if it's too high. Maybe it's just changing out the box spring to do a platform instead of that average height 9-inch box spring. You may not have to change your bed. You may just need it a little bit lower so you can get your feet on the floor when you're sitting and don't feel like you're going to fall. Then it's just changing out the box spring to do a platform, and now it's at the right height. Maybe adding a pole or something like that to be able to hold on to something and encourage that forward weight shift over your feet to be able to stand. Toileting is obviously one of the ADLs that are so key to be able to remain independent, for the dignity, to keep as much dignity as possible. A lot of people don't want assistance with toileting. And again, this is one area that there are a lot of options for creating a space and a toilet that is easier to get up and down from and to even help with some hygiene issues. That would be bidets are really easy now to add to a toilet. You don't have to have the separate bidet like they have mainly in Europe. But here you can, Toto makes them, you can get them on Amazon. It is a bidet toilet seat that just replaces your current toilet seat. It can help quite significantly with hygiene if that range of motion or strength is becoming limited. As a side note there, if you want warm water bidet, you do have to have an electric outlet somewhere near the toilet to plug in the bidet. And an electrician can usually do that pretty easily. If you don't mind, and there's a little bit of increased cost, those are more expensive bidets, but not crazy. Um, but if you don't mind having the water temperature of the toilet, then you don't have to have that electric socket, and then you can just do a standard bidet, and it'll just be water temperature of that toilet temperature. But those can be quite helpful. Again, as far as what other people may need, and maybe it's at different levels, right? Right now, maybe it's just a little bit of height that you need to help that sit to stand, because remember, standing up from lower surfaces is harder. So maybe it's a little bit of height that you need, whether it's added to the top of the toilet or the picture of the toilevator where you actually add height underneath the toilet if you don't want to change the seat, which some people don't. So options there. The most cost-effective option of adding height and armrest to the toilet is the bedside commode, the 3-in-1 commode frame, where you take the bucket out and just place the frame over the toilet. That if I just talk about Medicare, which then people, a lot of insurances just follow Medicare's guidelines, is almost one of the only equipment that may even be paid for. Different insurances are different, but um, in very basic situation, that's one way of doing it. It's not typically as functional because you have the legs that you're now adding that could be trip hazards. And for a larger person, they don't always like the size of the opening. It's a little restrictive, especially for larger men. Um, Other pictures, sometimes just adding armrest versus height, right? I'm 5'1". I probably will never need a raised toilet seat, right? Because then my feet would be dangling, and we don't want to do that usually during voiding. So just adding armrests may be enough. Adding the right, which we'll talk about, grab bars, and putting them in the right location if the toilet is next to a wall, that could be an option. Also, the toilet, that is the one with the blue handles there. There's actually a couple of these devices on the market, big range in cost, but it can be very helpful, and it is kind of like a lift recliner. It is put by push of the button. It helps lift someone off of the toilet. We don't want to get stuck on the toilet, so that can be a very, very helpful device. For bathing and showering, also, the list of things that are out there and available is crazy amount, but for the most part, right, we're looking at the safety of being able to get in and out of the shower. So you can do something as simple as, if it's a bathtub shower combination, it could be adding a tub transfer bench where you're eliminating the need to have to step over the side of the tub. You can stay seated. The blue one there at the bottom is actually on a track. I really like those a lot, because shifting down a bench could become difficult for people. So it actually allows, and it swivels, so you can get onto it easier, but it actually is on the track. So while you're seated, then your legs can be lift over the edge of the tub versus your more basic tub bench in the right-hand side on the bottom. Simple shower chair, so you can sit while showering. There are different ways of modifying tubs where somebody can come in and cut out the tub. I'm sure you've seen these on TV. Somebody can come in and just cut out the tub and put in more of a prefab type shower. Those have come a long way. And you can get lots of different aesthetics to that, and colors, and, have the grab bars put in when they, put this shower in. It only takes about 2 days process to get that done versus a full renovation of bathroom to have a zero entry shower, like the one with the dog. That's a zero entry shower. So that usually takes, unless you're, you know, building a home, that usually takes a full um, down through to the floor renovation because you have to change the flooring and the drainage for those types of showers. So that's a much bigger process than the prefab type. And then there are different options for lips and what you need for a prefab shower, but it can get pretty low to where it can be even rolled over if a roll-in shower chair is needed at some point. Um, Tub cutouts are an easy option. Whoops. And then also the tub, if people really like to soak, there are people who don't want to give up the soaking. The chair at the top there, that is a electric mechanical battery operated chair that you press a remote. It actually lowers you down into the water and then you press it again. It lifts you back up and then you can kind of just scoot over onto it. So you don't have to still step over the side. So it is a way to still be able to soak in your tub for a relative, not too expensive. People usually ask me about walk-in tubs. I'm a little neutral on them, pros and cons for certain situations. I'm fine with them, but they're quite expensive. They take a lot of water, and so that should be considered. And they're not always easy to get into because there is typically a lip. So they're not great for everybody for sure. Um, ADL modifications, these are, your activities of daily living. There are so many things, and this is one where people do their ADLs differently, even if there wasn't a diagnosis. So you really have to know how somebody is doing their task and how they want to be able to modify it, where the problems are, and then figuring out what makes sense for that person. So sometimes it's as easy as building up the handle of something if the grip is getting more difficult, or modified clothing so you can take away the fasteners, but if especially I find for men who may not want, who really are so used to wearing button-up shirts, they don't want to stop wearing button-up shirts just because they can't do fasteners. There's lots of options out there now where, whether it's magnet or Velcro, where you can still be wearing a button-up shirt but not have to manage the buttons. So lots of different ways. I love this hair dryer concept. So because we know how difficult that is to be able to hold a hair dryer and brush your hair. That may just be getting really just too difficult. So there are ways of modifying. I actually had a husband one time who built one of these hair dryer holders for his wife when she could no longer raise her arms up. So lots of different options there for ADLs, and usually ones that can be quite simple and not too expensive. Grab bars. What I say about grab bars is they have to be put in the right location. Location, just like real estate, it matters. And it can depend on this, obviously, the setup of the bathroom, but then again, how a person usually gets in and out of their tub or shower, where it makes sense for them. I had a client the other day who was pretty obvious right away. She kept holding on to the towel rack next to the shower. So I said, well, let's just replace that one with a grab bar, because I wasn't going to get her to stop holding on to the towel rack. That is how she did it. So we can just replace that with a grab bar. So now she can hold on to it. Because grab bars do not need to go both ends into a stud anymore, because there are now special mounts that can be used, that has allowed the different styles of grab bars. There are numerous now styles and colors and functions of grab bars. And it is because of that where you don't have to get it stud to stud, which always required a 16 to 18-inch grab bar. Now you can have the different lengths, different colors and things, so aesthetically can fit for your bathroom. Lots of great items in the kitchens and closets. And this is pretty much for anybody, pull-out drawers in kitchens are much easier than cabinets where it's deep and you're trying to reach into the cabinet. We know that those have become quite impossible at some point. So you do not need to renovate your kitchen to add some pull-out drawers. You can get pull-out drawers and racks like these on Amazon or Container Store. You do need to have the measurements of what your cabinet is, but you can get them pretty easily and have them installed by a handyman or whatever. And I do think like Home Depot does that kinds of stuff, or Container Stores. I love these pull down cabinets for those, right, as we can't reach up as much, but you don't want to totally rearrange your entire kitchen. There are these pull down shelving. Same thing in a closet. There are pull down shelving where you can have a rod that, again, you can easily reach and then bring your clothes down to you. Kitchens also just having different levels. So whether you just need to sit in a chair or whether you're in a wheelchair, having different counter levels allows for everyone to be using the space. Keeping spaces open to allow for whether it's assisted device you're ambulating with or whether it's wheelchair access, keeping spaces open to allow movement all the way around the kitchen. There are ways of, opening drawers and things like that. And that's great work to work with a therapist in your home to figure out the best way to move around your kitchen so you can open up doors and cabinets. On that note, the swing doors to enter and exit a room are probably one of the hardest things to manage when it comes to mobility, as mobility becomes more difficult. Swing doors become more difficult. There are pretty easy, not so you. I'm sure everyone's heard of pocket doors, right? You can do pocket doors even if it's like to a pantry, if it's a walk-in pantry, or pantries, by the way, are great to be adding these pull-out shelves. But for the doors, pocket doors can be expensive to add to a home, but adding handles like you see in this picture where you can still access the handles. You're not just trying to get this little thing on the side to be able to pull out the pocket door. But barn doors can be great and less expensive than the construction needed to do a pocket door. But that's great for in a small room. Maybe that swing door is really getting difficult to manage or taking up so much space in the bathroom that then it's hard to have an assistive device in it. A barn door may be the way to go, or accordion type doors or something like that, where we're just taking away the space that's needed for a swing door. And to continue a little bit, thresholds are a huge issue, especially as assistive devices are needed, whether it be wheelchair, walker, or whatever. So sometimes it's easy to change a threshold using rubber thresholds, just measuring the height of the threshold, and then, go on Amazon. If it's a 1/2-inch threshold, then go on Amazon and say 1/2-inch threshold ramp. And you'll see the options. Sometimes they're metal, sometimes they're rubber, like this one in the middle. The swing away hinges, the picture above the threshold ramp, that, you need a little bit more space, and that, again, that swing door is in the way and is decreasing the width of your doorway, because the door takes up about an inch to 2 inch, depending on the door of that space. Well, sometimes you just need that extra inch to 2 inches. The swing away hinges can be great, and that's an easy fix to just get that door out of the way, and it can open up all of the way. You do have to remove any stoppers that are behind the door for that, but that's a way of really getting a good inch added to the width of the doorway. Home entry exit can be a real issue for people. I get calls all the time. People say, "Oh, I just need a ramp for their front door," let's say. And I ask them for how many steps. And they'll say 5. And I say, it is not a ramp that you are going to be able to have, because the recommended length of a ramp, you all may know this, but the recommended length of a ramp is a foot of length for every inch of elevation. Now, you can modify that a bit if you're using a power wheelchair, but other people are probably still walking on that ramp, even if you're using the power wheelchair. So I still hesitate to decrease that ratio more than what that recommended is. So a foot of length for every inch of elevation. So that means if you have a 1-step entry, steps are usually 5 to 7 inches in elevation, in height, right? So if we say 6 inches, a 1-step entry requires a 6-foot ramp. So now we go to 3 steps. You're talking 18 inches of elevation. Now you're talking an 18-foot ramp for just the ramp part, because then you also have to add on space for if you anything above about 6, maybe 7 feet, but I usually say nothing above 5 or 6 feet of ramp. You need a platform at the top of the ramp. So that way, when you do go and approach the door, you're standing on a flat, or you're in a wheelchair on a flat surface, versus being at the top of an inclined ramp and trying to manage a door. So top of the ramp, that is another 5 feet in length to have at the top. So now you're talking, for that 3 steps, an 18-foot ramp plus the 5 feet at the top, and another basically 5 feet to add at corners if there's any turns needed. So it becomes quite long, and for most people, not possible to do ramps that are exceptionally long. You see at the front of the house and the bottom, that's a pretty long ramp for what we can presume from the picture is maybe only 3 steps, maybe 2 steps even. So most people don't have that kind of space to be able to have that length of ramp. And that's where platform lifts become an option. And that's the top left-hand corner there picture, where there's still pedestrian access on the stairs, and then you have a platform lift next to it that can be used for anybody standing with an assisted device or in a wheelchair. Europe, actually, there's this great device. It is here too, but very expensive, where by a push of a button, it is stairs. You push a button and then it becomes a platform lift. And then you push another button, it becomes stairs. So you can switch it back and forth between a platform lift and stairs. And that's great for people who don't have the space, let's say in a garage, to have both pedestrian access and a platform lift. So it's an option, but it is quite expensive. Sometimes at different levels of our process, maybe it's just adding handrails that we need initially. And so maybe it's like with the brick steps, those handrails were added to that doorway. Um, and it allowed somebody for in the beginning of their process to still be able to manage those steps with having the some support there with the handrails. The top right hand corner, that's a suitcase ramp. So that's a portable ramp for those simple steps. So I only recommend those for anything 6 feet or less. I don't recommend those for anything above 6 feet, but those are portable and can be carried away. And then when it comes to stairs inside of a home, although you can do stair lifts for outside of a home as well, I don't always recommend stair lifts for people as a long-term solution. If we think that progression of a disease process may lead to wheelchair use and difficulty with transfers. To be able to to manage with a stair lift, you really have to be able to transfer on and off of it pretty well. So that is one when it comes to when I meet people who their bedroom and bathroom is upstairs, and there's only a half bath on the main level of the home. I highly, highly, highly encourage people to make a plan. This is one of those that to me is one of the biggest. This home entry and exit, and then where that bedroom bathroom is, and if there's a stairs that you have to use to access that, is this is where that saving of money is huge because and dignity, because if that is the situation, just knowing what the plan is it that you have the space for an elevator in your home? And there are different options for elevators now in the home. You do not have to have a shaft anymore like it used to be. So there are some different options there. But again, price is significant. So is it going to be that, yes, I get to the point where I can't manage stairs and we will install an elevator. I'm going to call the contractor and figure out how much that is going to be. So the plan is set, even if I don't actually do it right now, but you have a plan. The other option is you say, we're not going to do an elevator. We are stair lift is not an option for us because we know we could get to that wheelchair level. And so I'm going to modify the main level of the house to have a full bathroom on the main level of the house now. So that way I know that I can stay in this house and still be able to get a shower when I want. I have met lots of people who have moved down stairs out of necessity because it's too unsafe to manage the stairs. And now they are going without a shower. So that's that dignity piece. Or the plan also being is that you know what your house limitations are. You know there's the set of stairs going up to that bedroom or bathroom or the huge amount of stairs to enter the home. And you know that you say, okay, I get to this level functionally and we will move. But again, that plan should be made and then you can start working towards it, or at least having that base of information that you know you can go to whenever you need. And then mobility and transfer assist devices. It's a lot of information here, and there's such a range of mobility and assistive devices. What I mainly wanted to kind of show you here is generally the different options, but also just to see that there is a progression and we know there's a progression. And working with a great therapist can help figure out what is the best item for you to be using at this moment, knowing that it may change, right? But we start as simply as just assistive devices, different types of walkers, or whether it's a regular rolling walker or a rollator, or could you use a cane versus a walker? And then when do you need to transition to a wheelchair? And then the options there. If somebody is getting fitted for a wheelchair, that should be done, I believe, with a therapist who's a specialist in there, but then also an ATP professional who can get you sized and fitted for an appropriate wheelchair that fits your needs. Um, and then for those transfers, especially when you have if you do need to transition to a wheelchair level, what do transfers then look like to get from the wheelchair to and from the bed and in the bathroom? We can start as minimally assistive as the sit to stand aids that in that top left-hand corner, that is still active participation by the gentleman. He still has to put weight through his legs. He has a bar to hold on to, but he does not have to shift his weight back and forth to be able to then sit on the next surface, right? So it can take away some of that precariousness, can definitely be very helpful for the caregiver if you're with a caregiver who can't do as, as physical of transfer assist that's needed. Those kinds of things are used in hospitals all the time, called a Sarah study in the hospital, but there are ones on the market that are much less expensive than the Sarah study. There are some that are electric, those that can actually, with a push of a button, help someone come to a standing position. Still allow some participation and weight bearing through the legs. And then we transition to more dependent lifts, which they're not, I mean, and we may know them, or therapists may say Hoyer lifts, but that is a brand. But these are more dependent lifts, lots of different brands out there. But from the bottom, actually the top right, that's just your standard lift that can be rolled anywhere from room to room. There are limitations with it because you do need that space underneath the bed. Sometimes they're very big and clunky, so it's hard to get those into bathrooms. And if there's rugs, right? Thick carpet, very hard to move on, especially with a larger client, right? A larger gentleman who maybe needed to be lifted, very hard to move that person on the wheels. Um, but but it is an option in certain situations. Different slings then, depending on what they're used for. That bottom right-hand sling is what's considered a toileting sling because it allows that open space of the bottom, and then that way somebody can toilet that way a little bit better. And then you can transition for those difficulties in using the more portable lift device is the where it's a set, although those can be moved, but this is from point A to point B. You can use the Hoyer lift or the lift without having to worry about the floor issues and the space issues there. So to get from point A to point B, that's very helpful. And then you move as most advanced would be an actual ceiling track. And there are different styles and tracks, but for the most part, this is where you can get into the bathroom easier. The doorways can be notched so where the track can still go through the door. It really eliminates a lot of the issues when it comes to the wheels and the lifts, the ceiling tracks. Again, that is price dependent on what people can do, but that is a great option for those that can. And then finally, just talking about more on the electronic aids to daily living. There are so many here that are out that I kind of just put it in categories as far as the types of electronic and aids, and AI is expanding this area quite significantly on what's available. So what I say today is probably going to be very different than even what's available next year. But options out there when it comes to environmental controls, right? For our thermostats or controlling lights, even blinds, appliance controls, appliance controls that are probably on the more simple side, things that have been around for a while, ways that you can use a battery operated or something like that to be able to manage appliances, different ways to communicate with people using all different types of devices, access control for doors and windows by a push of a button that can even be added to a wheelchair or just onto a remote. And then safety in regards to emergency call systems, medical alert systems, fall detection devices, lots of different options out there now for that, security cameras. So we're expanding in this area quite significantly. Here's just a few pictures of some things that are pretty readily available nowadays to make your life easier. Um, Fall detection devices are, I recommend them all the time. I always get the question on using the Apple Watch versus, like a medical guardian system, pros and cons. Apple Watch, I don't recommend unless people are already Apple users. And any smartphone, though, has so many different ways of helping with medication reminders or using the Echo Show 8 to be able to connect with Alexa devices to manage appliances and lights and a door lock at your door. Um, from a very easy in the bottom left-hand corner is just making your lights remote access by using just a remote access plug on any lamp, right? That's kind of a real simple way of making nighttime voiding, let's say, a little bit easier. Um, I love this ohm device. That's actually a way of managing stove knobs, turning on and off stove knobs by using an app. Um, there's automatic dog feeders and pill dispensers for medications. So lots of different options out there that can help make your life easier. And I think that's it. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh my goodness. My brain is full, Cindy.
Yeah, I know it's a lot.
But it's
It's a
also
lot.
good. I have
I
to
throw
say,
a lot out,
yeah, we just
knowing that everyone is different.
we just went through the process of the home automation, and I will just put it out there that it doesn't take a lot of money to automate your lights and your front door and the
Yep.
Zoom or the Ring camera and your thermostat, and it just makes life easier. So
Hmm.
I would highly recommend, especially
Hmm.
you suggested on the last screen. We
Yep.
do have a little bit of time if you're open to some questions, Cindy.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure. Of course.
great. You and I were talking before everyone logged on today, about, getting OT paid for, right? And one of the questions we received was, can a home OT assessment be covered by Medicare? How does that work?
Yes. So, and now they've made it a little bit easier. I think recently they actually, it used to be that Medicare would not cover home safety assessments. I now, yes. Um, but if you are in contact with an OT that can bill Medicare, they can usually do that, right? Because you can always talk about ADLs and things like that. What I would recommend, though, more on the issue is finding the right OT, which tends to probably be the harder part. So yes, if you find an OT, then you find out whether they are able to bill Medicare in whatever way. So like for example, I see people privately for those that either don't have Medicare or just want that one-time visit, just give me the recommendations and I kind of help them with the process then. I also see people through a neuro-based clinic who uses me as their OT here in Atlanta, and they bill Medicare for my visits. So we can do it through Medicare that way, Medicare B usually, because that's an outpatient side versus Medicare A, which is home health. So you can't bill Medicare A and B at the same time. So if you're getting home health therapy through Medicare A, you cannot get an outpatient OT to come in. But the OT in your home health agency for sure can be paid for under Medicare A. And then you would kind of get a sense of whether they can really dive in with you. That's probably your biggest issue is finding the right OT that has the skills and the desire to dive in and really problem solve with you. So that's your number one is find an OT through whether it's home health agency or an outpatient setting that you can do through Medicare. I do have access to some national OT groups who are kind of focusing in this area. So if you contact me afterwards, I'm happy to get you pointed in the right direction if you don't have an OT in your area that you know of.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, then to follow on to that, what about private insurance? What have your experience been with private insurance covering OT assessments?
That one you have to find out each one individually and see where your OT coverage is. So most of them do cover OT and PT, speech therapy. So most of them have a coverage. It's then though finding one that may be a network and where so it gets a little bit tougher, but they can hopefully point you in the right direction if you contact your insurance for your specific area. If it's a Medicare Advantage, then yes, most of them also cover OT and PT. And you just have to find an OT through ideally a mobile OT, which are out there now pretty much everywhere. And that will take that specific Medicare Advantage program.
Mhm. You had mentioned just going about finding an OT to start with, the process of doing that. Um,
Mhm.
that, some home health services will have OTs that they work with, like you.
Mhm.
Some clinics what's the best way for our FSHers, do you think, to find an OT to work with them?
I think it's first, if I don't want to assume who has been kind of connected to an outpatient therapy. You know, how many people here are already somewhat connected to a great PT, let's say that they really like to work with in an outpatient setting. That's probably your number. If you're already connected to an outpatient setting that you really like, that's probably your number one to ask there. If you're not connected to a good therapist already, even PT, then I recommend you do. I am partial and am biased in that way that I do feel like people should at certain times, especially with a progressive diagnosis, to touch in with therapists, get updates with programs and exercises, and work on transfers where you are at that level. But I recommend you find a therapist, not an ortho outpatient therapist, but one that really specializes in neuro and different diagnoses and not a sports PT. Not
Yeah.
anything bad about sports PTs, but they may not have the experience with different diagnoses that you all need. So I would start there, and if they're a neuro-based therapist, then they probably have more access
Mhm.
to what's out there in the community. If that does not work and they don't have an OT, then that they would recommend or can come to the home, then I would I would give the this national kind of association and find one that way and find out if there's one that is in your area that will come to the home. You can look up mobile OT slash home assessments
Mhm.
and see if one comes up in your area. But those are probably the wording I would use to.
Mobile OT. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Good to know. Excellent. Have a very specific question from Helen.
Mhm.
Could you share some examples of grab bars for showers that don't need to go into the studs? And I know exactly where she's coming from with that question.
Yeah. So there are suction cup grab bars out there. I personally cannot recommend them. In 99% of the cases, they will not stay up all the time. And if they don't stay up all the time, even if there's 1% of the chance that they fall down,
Mm.
then I can't recommend them as a safe alternative. What I will say is, and you can even look, any of the suction cup grab bars pretty much on the box say they're not meant for body weight. So that being said, lots of people don't want to put grab bars into their tile because yes, it requires a hole in the
Mm.
tile. Um, and some can't if they really have a lot of gradation on the tile, like you can't even do it. So it needs to be a relatively flat tile to put a grab bar. Um, you can look at where you're actually using and what you actually need because you can, for instance, is it really on the outside of the shower if you can add one on drywall that's just outside the shower that can really help for the exit of the shower? You can. I couldn't put a grab bar. My mother-in-law lived here for a little bit. I could not put a grab bar for various reasons where she needed it. So I actually put one of those floor to ceiling mounted poles in the shower. And that was it's tension mounted. You have to have somewhat of a flat ceiling, but tension mounted, and then she could reach to that, and there's no holes in my shower. Um, Sometimes it's adding if you're willing to do just the one where it's grab bar mounted, but it's the adjustable handheld shower head that's on a slide bar, because that's very useful for people that they like the handheld shower heads, or at least like to be able to put it at a level where then they can stand and it reaches them, even if they don't want to hold a handheld, but it's on that slide bar. You can get those slide bars that are grab bar folk, and that way you just have that one hole
Mm.
for that bar, but then it becomes a very useful item as well. Um, so hopefully that answered your question.
We just had a handyman install some grab bars, and it is worth it. They're so secure.
Mhm.
But if you can get a professional with the right tools, drilling into the tile and stuff, it's so much
Yes, you do
safer.
need a handyman does need to have a tile drill to do it correctly, and they shouldn't be doing it on the grout. And so it needs to be on the grout line. So it needs to be done by someone who has done it before.
All right, I think we've got it's time for one more question. I have a couple questions in here about cost, of course, which is on everyone's mind. Um, and so, you showed some things like home modifications and some really cool things. Do you know of any services or organizations that would offer grants or maybe some financial assistance to do these bigger projects or to provide help for even getting a van or something like that? Are
Right.
you aware of how one would go about locally to find something?
Uh, that is the most difficult issue. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I recommend you get an OT coming in because they'll provide you objective recommendations on what can be done. And if the comment is, I don't have the money for this,
Mm.
then you get the response of, okay, well, let's figure something else out. Versus if you ask a contractor, you're not going to get that, right? You don't ask a barber if you need a haircut. So, so that's number one. Number two, it is very difficult. I do not know of organizations that always give money. I always tell people to start with their, um, their diagnosis societies, right? Or independent living type thing. Like here we have the Shepherd Center, and they have some money for people who have had spinal cord injury. So you can sometimes find money that way. You can go through organizations like Habitat for Humanity or what's it called? Build It Together. Is that what it's called? Now I'm blanking on the name. Sometimes they have money. Sometimes Meals on Wheels organizations have money. But it's not, to put a ceiling lift in is less likely. But for some home fixing, or maybe the rails, or, things like that. That's going to be more likely. Medicaid has some money depending on the state, uh,
Hmm.
when it comes to, what do you call it? Hmm, it's late in the day for me here. I need my cup of coffee. But yeah, so Medicaid depends on the state, but there is some money there sometimes if you qualify for Medicaid. Um, but that's, for equipment here anyway, we have some donation type companies. It's called FODAC here. I don't know in every state, of course, but sometimes you can find equipment that way, pre-owned equipment. Um, yeah,
But you're right, it is very local, and we
it
found it here.
is.
I live in Colorado, and we do have a foundation. It's only for residents of Colorado, but
Mhm,
they do offer grants, and they will come out and build a ramp for you, like
mhm.
what you showed in some of your pictures. So it's
Right.
very local. It's just a matter of doing the research and Googling
Yeah, I
what.
would check churches. A lot of times they have the contact for foundations like that. I do hear of that one the most, where you have a group of people willing to build a ramp. And that could be that they're willing to put in some handrails and things too,
Yeah.
because it's usually, handymen that are volunteering their time.
Well, awesome. Well, I just noticed that we are out of time, unfortunately, because we could probably go all day, right? Sitting and just talking and talking and talking. We appreciate you so very much.
Sure, of
What a
course.
great presentation
Thank
and
you.
answering all of our questions. We appreciate you so much. And I just want to mention to everybody, Cindy actually volunteered and presented at the local FSHD 360 conference that was just in the fall in Atlanta for us. So thank you for everything you're giving back to our community. We
Sure,
appreciate it.
sure. And you had that my contact info was on there. So if somebody needs info that I can email and whatever, you're happy to answer questions.
Excellent. And to answer everyone's question, yes, this video will be up on our YouTube channel. Give us about a week or so to get it edited and posted. And Cindy's contact information is on that last slide of her presentation, so you can find it there. So we'll wrap up. Our next FSHD University is going to be on Thursday, March 5th. Is that next week? That's coming up very soon. And we're going to review life insurance options for individuals with FSHD. So another really helpful topic. So again, look at our website calendar for all these amazing upcoming events, both online and in person. Hopefully you New Jersey people will see me this weekend at our Saturday luncheon this coming Saturday. But thank you again for joining us, and we will see you again next month. And Cindy, once again, thank you so much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks for having me.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.